This is still my favorite meme. I just love the visualization of things leading to other things. No plan, no one making each one happen, just what happens when things interact. Because people seem to like my Flight into Danger video, I decided to do something similar, not about a film, but something even more influential, and almost as obscure. But first, I need to explain what Traveller's Tales. Traveller's Tales are a mostly extinct literary genre now, but they were one of the oldest. They grew out of stories that travelers would tell about their journeys, about the strange places they visited, and the weird people they met. These tales were written down and became popular reading material. These travelers would often include details they made up, or reports from other people and pass them off as their own, and as a result they were notoriously over the top, and often not very accurate. And as far back as 200 CE, there were people parodying them. A true story was by Lucian, an ancient Roman satirist. He arguably invented the comedy sketch when he parodied Socratic dialogues. He was responsible for the earliest known version of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and he wrote a true story. A piss take a traveller's tales where the hero travels to space, meets aliens, witnesses an interplanetary war, and comes across AI in the form of sentient lamps. Lamps being sentient was a riff on slavery. In ancient Greek, the word for slave literally meant tool that talks. A true story was arguably the first science fiction ever written. It's certainly the earliest known thing that can reasonably be described as sci-fi. Not bad for 1,800 years ago. Anyway, Traveller's Tales continued on, but eventually hit a fork in the road, with one side eventually evolving into more regular travel guides, and the other getting more and more outlandish and satirical as the world got smaller and more explored. The most famous example of that kind is probably Gulliver's Travels, a fantastic satire of pretty much anything that pissed off Jonathan Swift, set in the framework of a traveller's tale. The genre pretty much died in the 20th century as the world map finally got filled in, and the book I'm discussing in this video was written down in the latter half of the 19th century, and I found a clever way around the rapidly shrinking unknowns in the map. It's set underground. Hello and welcome to Headcanon Fodder, a collection of musings, theories, and random stuff about media. This time, the coming race and its mind-blowing influence. Before I get started properly, remember to like, subscribe, hit any bells in grabbing distance. They love it. And if you want to leave a comment telling me how bad I sound, please do. I'll be sure to read and cry about it. Anyway, The Coming Race was published in 1871 and was written by Edward Bulwer-Lytton. Or to give his full name, because he somehow managed to have Lytton in there 3 times, Edward George Earl Lytton Bulwer-Lytton, 1st Baron Lytton. Lytton was British and a member of Parliament. Look, there's a guy playing him in a TV show about Benjamin Disraeli, Queen Victoria's favourite Prime Minister.
I can't tell you how much I've looked forward to seeing you again.
I've been abroad for some time, Mr. Bulwer.
Oh, Edward, please.
And in 1862 he turned on the Crown of Greece for some reason, making him the second English writer that century to be considered for the Crown of Greece, after Lord Byron, who used his fortune supporting Greek independence from the Ottomans. Greece lost the fight and Byron died, so nothing came of that. But back to Bulwer-Lytton and his writing. Beyond The Coming Race, he was an incredibly influential writer, though in small ways. He coined the phrases, pursuit of the almighty dollar, the pen is mightier than the sword, the great unwashed, and best of all, he was the first man in history to open a story with, it was a dark and stormy night.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Oh, and fun fact, in the original 1922 Nosferatu, the Van Helsing character was called Dr. Bulwer, as a reference to Edward Bulwer-Lytton. Back in the day, this guy was a big fucking deal. Anyway, The Coming Race is an account of a man who finds himself deep underground, in the subterranean realm of the Vril-ya, a race of humans who diverged from the rest of us during Noah's flood. The Vril-ya are bronzed and giant. The average height of a woman, or gi, is 7 foot. They dress in ancient Egyptianish clothing, have great powers and amazing technology. All possible because of Vril-ya, an amazing fluid that does whatever the plot requires. The Coming Race is also known as Vril, the power of the coming race. It gives the Vril-ya telepathy, longevity, heightened intelligence, resilience, and the ability to destroy whole cities with a thought. They live in small, peaceful communities inside huge chambers, as high as the outer sky. It didn't invent it, but one of the things this book popularized was the Hollow Earth theory. Generations of exposure to Vril have also given the Vril-ya the ability to fly, though they have to wear artificial wings to make it possible. The narrator tries the wings, and without the changes wrought by Vril, he just can't make it work. The hero concludes that the Vril-ya are our superiors, but chooses to leave when his host's daughter falls in love with him, and her father orders his death. The father doesn't have anything against him, he just sees him as akin to a dog, and the possibility of mere humans degenerating the superior Vril-ya is just too great a risk. And the narrator agrees. It is kind of funny to have a nakedly racist, literally Victorian bigotry in a book but aimed at a white guy. And the white guy agrees that he is kind of shit, actually. Anyway, the book ends with a warning that the Vril-ya will eventually run out of space in their underground world, and they will emerge to claim the upper world. The coming race. Whoa! If all this is kind of familiar, then congratulations, you might have seen Iron Sky 2. Anyway, you might find it hard to believe because it's never received a film or a TV adaptation, and hell, artwork is hard to find, but this was incredibly popular in the Victorian era. The word Vril even became a popular term for anything that gives you energy. The only real bit of evidence of that brief popularity is Bovril. For Americans, it's basically tea, but instead of tea, it's beef. The name Bovril is short for bovine vril. Anyway, for years, I believed that the first science fiction convention and cosplay happened in the first Worldcon in 1939. Here's Forrest Ackerman from the famous Monsters of Filmland doing some OG cosplay. But no, it turns out that in 1891, some Victorian fans of the coming race did it first. Now, this event is not officially recognised as a science fiction convention, but they rented out the Royal Albert Hall in London. It was opened by Queen Victoria's daughter. There were booths, stalls, themed entertainments, and even a shop floor. Check out this floor plan. That is a sci-fi convention. And not only that, but we have a very early appearance from Bovril. So early that it's still called Vril. There were personalised Vril-ya themed amusements like winged Vril-ya flying above the hall in wires, magic shows designed to show people using Vril, and yes, there was cosplay. Hard to make out in this engraving, but she is wearing wings. That is Vril-ya cosplay. The printed out guides for the event even made use of the actual words from the Vril-ya's language, and there was a performer playing Z, one of the main characters, who wore a tiara with early electrical lights in it, to represent Vril. The whole thing was meant to last for 3 days, but it ran for 5. But it cost so much to run that it just about ruined the backers, so it didn't happen again.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But you kids are gonna love it.
So, is that all the book is inspired? Well, look at the time remaining, you know it's not. Strap in because it's gonna get wild. Instantly, some occultists quickly started looking at the coming race and concluded that Bulwer-Lytton had based the story on reality. That there was a real power that could be harnessed by those superior to normal people. The most important of these was Helena Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, one of the wilder offshoots of spiritualism, though she didn't think the users of this power were living underground, but were spiritual guides. Anyway, through a few generations of occultist crossbreeding ideas, the Vril-ya got merged with Atlantis, and eventually resulting in the ancient Aryans. Popular with right-wing German lunatics in the Weimar era, one of the groups was even called the Vril Society, which led directly to the SS's own brand of deranged occult madness. Though they believed that the superior race were extinct, but the Indo-European peoples were descended from them, with the Nordic people most closely related to them. Ironically, in the novel, the Vril-ya are former Egyptian or Indian coded. They were brown-skinned, kind of bronzy. All this is kind of funny, but as far as I can tell, the most accurate depiction of what a Vril-ya looks like in the book is the Scarlet Scarab from Moon Knight of all things. Wings, Egyptianish clothing, darker skin colour than a Caucasian. All she's really missing is a light-up tiara. Anyway, the SS believed so strongly in this that they instituted a breeding program to try and recreate the extinct Aryan Superman by breeding them with Nordic people together. And some others spent time trying to find Vril, even though Bulwer-Lytton said that it's basically electricity. Now, Hitler didn't believe in all this, but a lot of Nazis did, Himmler chief among them. And as we all know, the Nazi occult madness has led to a hell of a lot of pop culture over the decades. Everything from Hellboy to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Anyway, like I wish the rest of the world would do, moving on from the Nazis, the Vril-ya directly inspired the Morlocks and the Time Machine, and I believe that the coming race was the earliest known example of the secret superior, technologically or otherwise, society living underground. And once that trope was established, it inspired groups as diverse as the evolved humans from beneath the Planet of the Apes to the Silurians from Doctor Who. The Silurians being a technologically superior species who fled underground because of a great cataclysm and will one day emerge to reclaim the surface. And in classic Who, they even have vaguely defined mental powers, just like the Vril-ya. Honestly, the book was probably to copyright. They could have just called them the Vril-ya.
Silurians, wasn't it? The Brigadier was telling me.
That's a complete misnomer. Now, properly speaking, they should have been called the
Vril-ya! And if we remove the underground part of the technologically superior people living on Earth, hidden from the rest of us, we have Wakanda from Black Panther. Was vibranium, with all its amazing benefits, inspired by Vril and its amazing benefits? Were Jack Kirby and Stan Lee thinking of the coming race when they created it? No, probably not, though Jack Kirby was the right age, they might have read it. But regardless, the trope only exists because of the book. Hell, you could even argue that the Secret Wizard Society in Harry Potter is yet another spin on the same trope. The wildest effect that the book has had, though, goes back to Theosophy, which borrowed much, if not all of its mythology from the coming race. The co-founder and first president of Theosophy was a man called Henry Olcott, an American veteran of the Civil War. He and Blavatsky, the creator of Theosophy, eventually moved the society to India, and in 1880 they became Buddhists. You see, Theosophy, like Hinduism and Buddhism, was fine with religious synchronicity. You could be in multiple religions and people weren't locked into certain beliefs. Indians at the time basically viewed Theosophy as kind of a weird version of Hinduism. So while Olcott was president of the Theosophical Society, he wrote heavily in Buddhism. He translated texts, he wrote a catechism that is still in heavy use today. He founded schools. His ideas permanently altered Buddhism. And not in a bad way, he was just important. And in 1895, he was even involved in designing what would become the official Buddhist flag. In Sri Lanka, to this day, he is credited as a major figure in the late 19th century Buddhist revival. You see, Buddhism had been suffering under decades of British colonialism. The British weren't actively trying to wipe it out, but they didn't exactly discourage Christian missionaries either. Olcott died in 1907 and there are statues, streets, and schools named after him in Sri Lanka. Okay, one last thing unless I think of more. The coming race is kind of interesting when it comes to gender. Vril-ya men, An, and woman, Gi, pre-marriage are basically reversed with regard to gender norms. An, men, are demure, chaste, they are to be wooed. While the Gi are dominant, they romance the An, they are in charge. But when they marry, they give up their wings and become good little wives to the now patriarchal An. It's like Lytton couldn't quite keep outside his own social norms. Anyway, one of the things that this inspired was the 1886 book She by Rider Haggard, the best porn star name a non-porn star ever had. She, alongside Haggard's King Solomon's Mines, basically codified the colonial, Lost World-style adventure story. White people with guns going into the jungle or somewhere related, meeting up with natives, having wild events, coming across magic. So everything from the Jungle Cruise, to the 1999 Mummy, to the Jumanji films, to Congo, to Indiana Jones. So how did this inspire She? Why was I talking about the book's proto-feminism? Because She is about some white people finding an isolated matriarchal society. Aisha, the she of the title, was directly inspired by Z from the coming race. Powerful, imposing, and possibly beautiful. You might not be surprised to hear that just two of the things that took inspiration from She and Aisha were J.R.R. Tolkien with Galadriel and George R.R. Martin with Daenerys Targaryen. The coming race started a lot of dominoes falling. Anyway, that's about it. I'm sure I've missed stuff, but that's just about enough for now. The coming race somehow managed to inspire and influence cosplay, science fiction conventions, a very common sci-fi trope, occultism, Nazi occult madness, and its derived pop culture, the history of Sri Lanka, changes to a major world religion, and the fucking adventure story. Anyway, let's just let Bulwer-Lytton get in the last word.
I just want to entertain!
But did you know one thing that it apparently didn't inspire? H.P. Lovecraft. Here we have a book about a secret group of super beings living underground, threatening to replace humanity. A secret group of super beings called the Vril-ya. And from what I've managed to find, Lovecraft apparently didn't even know it existed. Life is weird as hell sometimes. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, check out the Patreon and see our wonderful rewards. You can make requests or join the Discord. If you want to give me a tip, check out the Ko-fi. If you just want to watch, thanks for the view. If I can think of another piece of work as important and obscure as these, I might just start a new series called The Domino Theory. Hell, I've already got ideas for a follow-up to Flight into Danger, and how it might have led to K-pop.